First of all, Bulavinaka Major General retired Sitiveni Lingamama Ndarambuka, former Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition and the Sodelpa Party from Fiji. We thank you, Lord, for giving your time to avail yourself for a brief interview with Radio VKV Aotearoa. These few questions are based mainly on social media opinions that had been aired on the Facebook platform for the past few weeks. It is only convenient to look into these opinions and be able to form a basic understanding of what people think about the political scenario in Fiji as we speak. We will go first, sir, to the elections and election process in Fiji at the moment. So, why is it so important for voters in Fiji to have a basic understanding of the electoral system currently used in Fiji, in particular, the proportional representation concept?
Thank you very much. It's a very good question, and it is one that every political party in Fiji and aspiring candidates, particularly those who are aspiring to lead a political party into victory and form government. The concept of the Hunt system and the proportional representation is very important for us to understand, particularly in societies like Fiji, where we're still developing the knowledge, the understanding of politics. We talk about democracy glibly. Democracy is representation government. It's governance by representatives of the people. And so often we feel and we hear people talking about, oh, the government not doing its work. But every government is deserved by the people because the people elect the government. In the system of election we have, using the dehunt and the representation by the proportional representation in Parliament, depending on the number of votes, is very important for us to understand. Because of our understanding of the common denominator in the calculation of the percentages and the number of seats. It is important for us to know that in general elections based on the Hunt system, it will be the major parties that will dictate. And the smaller parties detract. They effectively detract, because they affect the denominator. The denominator is the number of voters. And when we start the count, the denominator could be 600,000. That's the number of registered voters, say. And as the count progresses, the percentages fluctuate as parties increase their support or get an increase in numbers from areas where they're popular in. So at the end of that, we may have a party registering 50% of the votes. And then you go to the count, and you find out that the smaller parties do not go above the threshold. All those smaller parties will disappear from the calculation, which decreases the denominator. When you decrease the denominator, your percentage with the same number of votes you have won increases. For example, the 50.02% won by the Fiji First as the counting progressed. It became bigger. It became 54%, because the smaller parties disappeared and they were subtracted from the denominator. The denominator decreases, the number on top remains, the percentages increase. So from the 50.02% they won in the count, increased to 54%, giving them 27 seats. So it's very important for us. and the other, and the those when it when the it is in when the balance is very close, it is very important for people to go and vote. We have more people not voting than those that voted for Sodelpa. That's very important. Another party could have been formed to win those that didn't want to vote for Sodelpa or Fiji First or any of the other political parties. And they would have won a number of seats, a big number of seats. So it's very important for the people of Fiji to understand the system, understand why it is important for us to vote, and important for the political parties to educate their voters and tell them what it's all about.
Mr. Mbuka, can you briefly describe how well you would want a citizen to understand and grasp the Duhan formula? Like, for instance, the 5% minimum threshold.
The 5% minimum threshold is pretty straightforward. It's very tough because when you look at a House of Representatives that's made up of 51%, you would expect that a person with 2%, with 2% of the vote would make it. That is the normal percentage of votes to seats. If you win 2% of the vote, you win one seat. But that is not the case because they don't do it that way. They've grouped the votes and the candidates so that a party that wins 5% deserves a seat, not a person who wins 2%. So it's very important for those who are considering, I can go independent and still win. You might win, but if you won your one seat with 10%, that makes it the other votes, the other seats very cheap for the other parties. You're making it easier for them.
How well do you understand the ambiguous strategies, like the blackout period, as a mechanism of weakening the voice of opposition in Fiji?
System is a normal system used in most democracies, and it's normally from 12 midnight the day before polling until the end of the polling. And it is not something sinister that the Fiji electoral office come up with. It is something that we must understand. It applies to most democracies, and it is to avoid discord. It's to avoid one-upmanship right up to the time of voting when crowds gather at the polling stations. It could ignite a disturbance. So we calm everybody down, go and vote. You know who you're going to be voting for. You've heard all the messages up to that moment, 12 midnight, the night before, and that's it. We should not look at it as something that the government has imposed on the people who are going to vote.
Sir, in Fiji's last election, and regular updates to overseas viewers, for instance, on TVNZ, stopped abruptly on the eve of the first day of polling. Were candidates and other political parties or the election officers and government aware of this?
No, we were not aware. It's something that the local legislations would dictate to broadcasters. For Fiji, that was the law, that you stop broadcasting, you stop all public publicity announcements and so on, and advertising and campaign speeches at midnight. But for the foreign media, that's something that is determined by the local and domestic legislations and regulations. For us, it does not have any effect because the polling, particularly the overseas voters, would have sent in their votes by then. It is already of no effect on which way they would vote, even if they broadcast election rings right through the day, even into the following days of the polling. I think that it is a very good thing for foreign media broadcasting domestically in their own domain were allowed to do that, because that's what we do for the in the broadcast and the interest shown in the U.S. Presidential elections, in the UK election, general election, Australia, New Zealand. We listen to what's going on right through. They may have stopped the night before, but the rest of the world is still focusing on what's happening in New Zealand, America, and UK, wherever, because we're interested. For example, last week, people were interested in what was going on in Japan, the change in the leadership in Japan and what goes on. Now everybody's focusing on America, and I'm sure that the international media will not stop the night before the November day.
It sounded more like media blackout during elections itself, not leading up to elections. Do you have any idea of at least a genuine reason behind all the secrecy?
The secrecy in sort of toning down or even restricting media over the time. It is an unfortunate picture of a government that's not sure of itself. A government that really champions democracy and democratic processes will not worry about that, because the people deserve the government they deserve, and you don't try to monitor the effect of the media and shut up the media just because you think it will affect you. You have done your best, I hope, in the 4 years that you have been in office. And that should be enough to carry you through. If the people are dissatisfied, no amount of restrictions on the media, no amount of publicity you put into the media on the day of the election, the week before the election, will affect the outcome of that election.
So we'll move on to a recent budget and strategies and COVID-19. Is it prudent to put aside 1.2 billion for payments of interest under Head 52 of the recent budget?
It is not productive. It is not productive. In fact, the world has moved away from that, if you can call that prudence. The world has gone into an adventurous spirit of using whatever they have for growth and development, instead of putting it and paying for something that will not produce growth. For example, putting money aside just to pay for interest or loans, that does not bring out any growth. It brings about perhaps a reduction in the debt, but there is no effect on your spending as far as growth is concerned. What needs to be done is negotiation with our creditors at that time, international lenders, to see if they can work on a moratorium. They can agree to a moratorium of, say, 5 years. In 5 years, we hope that our economy will stabilize and start growing to the extent that we are able to pay our debts as well as the interests on the various guarantees, perhaps, that we have. Fiji is in a very good learning position to do that. We see how much debt we have, and we have grown our debt burden because we have been bullish in our spending, in our budgeting, not anticipating, even not accepting that bad times may come. And now bad times have come. And we are restricted, our hands are tied, we must make do with what we have. And it's better, and other governments are doing it. They're spending the money, what they have, on growth and recovery, while we are trying to keep that money so that we can pay off debt and interests.
Mr. Mbuka, can you explain a bit on possible debt review and moratorium steps that could have been taken?
It's not something that could have been taken. It's not something that must be taken now. We cannot anticipate bad times, but we can expect bad times. And when those bad times come, then you already have your moratorium exercises in place so that we can borrow up to this. But if our GDP drops, our production drops, everything drops, our income generation drops, all these things necessitate negotiations for moratorium and reduced repayment programs, even the liquidation of our debt or forgiving our debts, as Greece did a few years ago.
Has it been proven that work for cash programs did work for some countries when unemployment increased, as in the wake of the current COVID-19 pandemic?
Not only in other countries, it's happening in Fiji. Some employers in Fiji are doing that. I know a friend of mine who has he has a few assets available. What he has done is negotiated with a bank to lend him money with his properties, some that were unencumbered now being mortgaged, so that he can borrow money, so that he can keep his employees working. And they're working for cash. Some employers have negotiated with the workers. Everybody comes to work, but you will be on a minimum level. Some people go back to basic pay instead of an increment. Like in the army, you have a private over 2, a private over 4, a corporal over 2, corporal over 4 years. If everybody agrees, okay, let's all be paid as corporal, substantive corporal, no increment, and that frees up money for other things. So you can keep employing the same number of people, but on a reduced pay. So it's cash for work, whatever work you do. We have a large military force for the peacekeeping operations. But on Wednesday last week, they were all playing touch rugby on the ground, all covered with people playing rugby, while offices were vacant because there have been reduced number of workers, reduced hours in government and in the private sector. And we see our soldiers, our servicemen, training or playing touch rugby before midday on a Wednesday. Normally sports is from 3 o'clock onward when I was in the army. It is something that our senior military planners should be looking at. How can we contribute by reducing the number of soldiers on full employment and full pay, and send the rest out to work in the rural areas, even resuming the 6-monthly rotation for peacekeeping operations, so that you send soldiers out for 6 months, which means you will employ double the number in 1 year. And they will all be paid comfortably with their allowances, and they come back and they go straight out to Civil Street and are employed in national development in non-military roles.
So we will move on to Fiji's ailing healthcare system. Is it a fact that the Fiji First government and the Honorable Prime Minister has hardly done enough for the healthcare system in the past 10 years?
They have done very little. They couldn't do much more because that is just the nature of Fiji. Fiji is made up of islands, and a strategic planning of our health requirements would dictate that we needed divisional hospitals and district hospitals and health centers. Those have been done by the previous governments. They didn't all have the 4 divisional hospitals. The Tumara government, the colonial government, had a major colonial war memorial hospital in Suva, and everybody referred their serious cases to Suva. They were referral hospitals, and then the Lautoka was developed, and then Nandi and the Lambasa. So they couldn't do many more. You cannot have more divisional hospitals. You cannot have more district hospitals, but you can improve what you have. And that's where the government should have been focusing. After the Alliance and the SBT government, every subsequent government should have been just improving the quality of services available in the hospitals. And if you were to increase healthcare in the rural areas, you could have mobile health teams instead of building one here, building one there, building one there, go and cut the ribbon for a new health center that you don't need. So if we were to really look at effective deployment of funds and utilization of funds, because we don't have much to throw around, and improve on the quality of the hospitals and improve the quality of the roads so that everybody has access to quality medical care.
Mr. Mbuka, you did state in one of your recent social media posting that the Minister for Economy must know that our healthcare system is in complete shambles. On that note, who has really sacrificed to maintain its efficiency with its current status?
You can't blame a good worker, will not blame his tools. So credit for the effect of the work of the health system should really go to the workers, the doctors, the nurses, the health inspectors. They have done a lot with deteriorating tools, with deteriorating facilities, with deteriorating buildings. They have managed to keep the standard reasonably high so that the morale of the people is stable. It is really them that have made the sacrifice, not the government in its implementation or expenditure of national wealth.
Meanwhile, Mr. Mbuka, according to the latest statistics, 4,400 people are reported to be suffering from dengue and leptospirosis. At least 10 people have died this year. Is this a reflection of how lethargic our health system is? Since the treatment strategies of these diseases are decades old, but we can't seem to contain it.
It is should have been a joint effort. When we look at the healthcare system in Fiji, we'll have the preventive side of it, the curative side, and then you go to primary, secondary, and tertiary healthcare for our medical professions and facilities. Leptospirosis and what's the other one? Dengue. They've been here for a long time. Like in the colonial days, there was leprosy. There was those other diseases that came around. We didn't have malaria, so we are blessed. But other countries in the Pacific, like the Solomons and Papua New Guinea, where they had malaria as a common thing. There were national programs and international programs put into place so that we eradicate those diseases from among the societies. And Fiji should have done and gone into that program a long time ago with the rest of the world and gone through preventive and curative aspects of the diseases. And for the preventive side, there should be wider, broader education on what to prevent. For example, in the villages now, you have people growing things inside the village, whereas the village regulations of the past forbade cultivations within the bounds of the villages. And then 25 meters beyond the village boundary, you're not allowed to have anything growing there, even voi, plants that will have water inside the roots of the leaves, the stems. They collect water where mosquitoes can breed. You put your pigsties well out and animals out. Anything that will encourage the growth and multiplication, the increase the population of things that cause these diseases, whether they be insects or rodents. So those are the things that we need to really be focusing on. Lately, we've been focusing on marijuana and fishing and all these things and trying to police them, when the village people, the village leaders, the Turangi Koro, the headman, the Turangi Nyabusa should really understand what they need to do to improve the whole health system in the country.
So we'll now move on to social medias and rumors that normally circulated it. As I have alluded to earlier, it is only convenient to look into these social media platforms and see how people see the political scenario in Fiji as we speak. Recently, rumor mongers have taken to the social media in a public act of vilification, characterizing a simple robbery as an assassination attempt, citing and suggesting Sodelpa's involvement in the incident. Is this true? Should this concern voters?
What should concern the voters is the irresponsible use of the social media. Those that blame Sodelpa should know that they are lying. Sodelpa is a party. We have individuals in the party. We have individuals in the party who may be capable of thinking about those things. But as the party has some very basic principles and ethos that we try and uphold and maintain and project with our members. And we do not ascribe to those thinking, and we totally condemn anybody thinking like that, and the misreporting of the events to try and cast aspersions on a noble party that is the Social Democratic Liberal Party of Fiji.
Has this really been the hallmark of the Fiji First government, creating fears amongst members of the community?
I don't know whether it's a hallmark of the party. I think it's some members of the party could be bent on doing that. And if it's social media, we can't really blame the party, but we can. The social media is a personal thing, personal to the people who use social media. It would be unfair of any national leader, whether you're leading a political party or you're leading a department or leading a vanua, to suspect that your government is doing that. And if they are doing it, if they are doing it, they should stop. It's irresponsible.
Mr. Mbuka, draconian decrees and legislations are already in place that has streamlined the work of mainstream media. Can the Fiji First government achieve this control also on social media?
They can try, but the social media is quite free, and as democracies mature, their concept and outlook and control of the media relaxes as they continue to uphold the principles of democracy, one of which is the freedom of expression. And that should really be a hallmark of any responsible government in a great democratic system like we boast to be in. And if we're not doing that, then there's no point at all in saying we are a democratic country. We're only democratic if we are represented fairly by our reps, representing the people and their views and their freedoms, and we're upholding their freedoms.
Mr. Sitiweni Lingamamandarambuka, as the former Prime Minister of Fiji from 1992 to 1999 and the leader of Sodelpa Party, are you racist? And by implication, a threat to national security?
I'm not a racist. I'm proud of my race. I'm a patriot. I am proud of my country, and I served more than 2 decades in the army. I participated internationally in peacekeeping. I'm very proud of my tradition, my culture, and I'm sure everybody's proud of theirs. And I spoke out when they tried to make everybody call themselves Fijian. If that is a citizenry brand, I have no issue with it. But if you want to call everybody a Fijian, we are taking something very proud out of the culture of what we used to call the Indo-Fijians of Fiji. Why call them Fijian when they are proud Indian? They're proud of their races. They're proud of their own cultures. And in fact, when they go to India, they will probably say, "Oh, I'm Sikh. I'm a Tamil. I'm a Gujarati." So we have tried to brand everybody the same. But citizenship, fine. We're all Fijian by common citizenry of Fijian. But because I am proud of my race, perhaps people can call me a racist, but I'm a very fair person. You will see by the products of my leadership from 1992 to 1999, we tried to embrace everybody. And I'm the leader, first leader, or the only leader that has cancelled and annulled and in fact took out from the laws of Fiji books the Indian Repatriation Act. That was an existing act until after 1987 we abolished it, which means that no Indian can be repatriated to India.
Mr. Mbukan, do you as a person and as a politician believe in the abrasive quality of the press?
I don't see the press as being abrasive. I know they're selective in what they do for my speeches. I can only speak for myself. When I say something, some media will turn it around and twist it to suit their agenda. They have an agenda. They have to promote this person or this political party. And if somebody says something good about themselves, they tone it down, or they put it in such a way that it's still overshadowed or dominated by the good they see in the other party.
So we will now move on to the state of Fiji's economy. Fiji's national public debt has now reached epic proportions. Could Fiji be better off if the government was more diligent and accountable during their time in public office?
It happens when governments or leaders try to make an impression. You live beyond your means and you find yourself suddenly carrying too much debt. And when they came in 2006, they tried to impress everybody that they're better than the previous leaders. So they freed up a lot of things. We were still at the stage of our growth, our national growth, that we didn't need to have everything free. Slowly and slowly and slowly we would get to the stage where we are now. But we wouldn't have gotten to this stage if we had gone prudently in our development. What we can afford, we get. What we cannot afford, we don't get yet. When we can, then we get it. And that's the bullish aspect of spending, that this government has driven Fiji into this state of indebtedness. When we look at our debts and our contingent liabilities, that's what we have guaranteed. We've guaranteed a lot of the loans, Fiji Airways loans from the Fiji National Provident Fund. They're guaranteed. Provident Fund will get its money, but it's government money. Government money that could have been used for other development. You're bringing it to pay a debt instead of building better roads or improving on the roads and better facilities and health, etc. You're paying off debts.
Recently, Fiji Airways CEO Andre Filion has been appointed chairman of the board for the Fiji Development Bank, after Fiji Airways has just borrowed $75 million from the FDB itself. Now Filion now becomes the borrower and the lender. Isn't this a conflict of interest?
It is a conflict of interest, and it's undesirable for government to do that. We have had chairman after chairman after chairman of the board of the Fiji Development Bank who are local. We don't need an expatriate to come and be in charge of an institution that is borrowed heavily from the one they are now being posted to chair. We have enough local expertise to man those two appointments.
From that perspective, what is the status of Fiji's economy as we speak?
It is going to be dire straits ahead of us. We'll have to just tighten our belt, be realistic. Everybody will have to make a sacrifice. If we're going to reduce our earnings, let's do that. But let's have every increase earn us. If we can reduce our earnings so that we increase earners, we will be doing well.
Would it be better to bring back mechanisms like the provincial councils, district advisory councils, and select committees of parliament to consider and endorse proposals by government?
That is a very logical thing to bring back. It should never have been ignored anyway. They are still there, those bodies are still there, and utilizing them and not utilizing them is a big sin in governance, because they are the eyes and ears of government on the ground. They bring out the concerns of the people and contribute to the formulation of policies for national development.
Mr. Sitiveni Lingmamandrabuka, is it fair to say that Fiji at the moment is not really being run on democratic principles, but on an oligarchic power structure, where the rule of the few has the upper hand, characterized by the heavy-handed approach of the Bainimarama-led government?
That is a rhetorical question, because you know the answer and the new listeners know the answer. The answer is yes. We are not in a participative democracy. Oligarchy is the system that is now in use, where only one or two of the cabinet members participate in the formulation and the implementation of the policies, particularly in the distribution of the national wealth for the achievement of political objectives.
Sir, thank you so much for your time this morning, and we wish you all the best.